Okay, we're exercising on the treadmill. And here, let's say, heart rate, CO2, and in your book, look on page 71. Okay, you see these names here, Balky, Bruce, Modified Bruce, Naughton. All those are treadmill tests that they administer. Now, what do you notice about the population that they use for this? Active and sedentary men, active and sedentary women, active and sedentary men, women, cardiac patients, high risk, male cardiac patients, and so forth. So what do you notice about those populations? Okay, and most of them are what? Are they soccer players? Are they volleyball players? Are they basketball players? Are they triathletes? Are they runners? No. They're what? Sedentary. They're what we see when we walk out of this room, right? Okay. And so they're not athletes or whatever. They're just people walking down the street. And so what if we grab somebody out there, hey, come on, we're going to do a maximum treadmill test on you. We're going to put you up there. We're going to run you so fast or whatever till you fall out or whatever. Okay. And so what speed are we going to start them at? We're going to start them out at one of these speeds based upon one of these protocols here. And so we have protocols, and so maybe we start them out at a certain speed, and then we want to try to keep them walking a lot because they probably aren't runners anyway, and plus it's hard for us to take our data and measure it when they're running full speed on the treadmill. So we start them out walking, and then we increase either speed or elevation every 3 minutes or so, and then make it a little harder, a little harder, a little harder, and then try to get them to do what? Go till they can't go anymore, right? And do a maximal test there. So that's why we have these protocols. I've done every one of these protocols through the years. The Balky and the Bruce are the more common. The one that your norms are based on in your book are probably the Bruce test from the aerobic center. Bruce or Balky one, but we have protocols, and then we can say, hey, you went so far, your VO2 is this or that or whatever, based upon those protocols there. So here, we start them out here at heart rate 60, max is 200, 50, the VO2 might be 2 max, might be 7, let's just say 7, 14, 28, 35, 45, something like that, in terms of VO2. So if the heart rate goes up, what happens to the VO2? It goes up too, right? Okay. But you'll go up to a certain point, and then it can't go up anymore, right? Whatever point that is. And then it does what? Levels off. The aerobic right here, right? And then anaerobic right here, right? So, if we go out for a run, we say, okay, we're going to run 3 miles, and then once you go as hard as you can for 3 miles, and then at the end of 2.8 miles or 9 miles, you need to run as hard as you can. Then we see the finish line, then we're going to pick it up and go sprint, right? So during that sprint, you're no longer working aerobically, you're working what? Anaerobically, right? And so you're working anaerobically, you reached your VO2 max aerobically, but you're able to do what? Continue to keep going, right? Because you're working anaerobically, and we can work anaerobically for a couple minutes, right? So that's why when you're running a 5K or run, you're jogging or whatever, you see the finish line, and then you do what? You want to look good for your picture, right? Huh? You sprint it in, right? Raise your hands, look cool, right? You don't want to be dragging in across the finish line, do you? Huh? You got to look good, right? When you get out of the water, you take your your swim cap on, right? You don't want your picture made with that thing on, do you? Huh? You got to look good, right? Okay. And so, back to this, we can work aerobically up to what? A certain point, and then we get what? Anaerobic. Now, what happens when we get anaerobic? This is lactic acid, blood lactate, and maybe 2 millimoles. In here, in max, it may be 12 millimoles or whatever. In maximal exercise, our muscles become acidic, right? And then our muscles can't function very well when they're acidic, and our muscles are saying no more. Because your lactate level is at a level as high as you can tolerate within the muscle, and if I'm the coach, I can holler and scream and kick and throw a fit and say, run, you're a quitter, you're not trying hard or whatever, and the lactic acid is creeping up, and you're not going any place. Because physiologically, you've reached your what? Your limit. Your maximal level, right? From a physiological standpoint. And so, you're cooked. You're done. That's it, right? And so, you can't go anymore. The only way you can go further is to what? Slow down. Taking in oxygen gets rid of what? Lactic acid, converts it back into energy, and then we can slow down, recover, and then we can do what? Go again, right? So, in terms of a maximal test, the person will go, and they get to this particular point, and we speed it up again, and then all of a sudden, they can't go anymore, and then we know what? That's it. That's it. But then they get off the treadmill and say what? Oh, I could go for another minute if I really wanted to. No way, you can't. Because what's going on inside your cells? They're become acidic. Cells don't work good acidic. The hydrogen ions are building up, and the lactic acid is building up, and you think you can go more, but you can't. You have to stop. There's a point, someplace, every one of us, there's a point where we can't go anymore, right? Until we recover, because we become what? Anaerobic, and that energy system can go only for a couple minutes. Now, we monitor it. We can look at lactate, if we take lactate, or we can measure the RER, respiratory exchange ratio, and what that tells us is what we're using for fuel. An RER of about 0.75 is fat. Okay? So here, they're using mostly fat for fuel, and then the closer they get to the anaerobic, they're using carbs for fuel. So then, if RER gets up to 1.2, they're done. Because they're using all what? All carbs, right? When you're using all carbs, you're working what? Anaerobically, right? And then you're going to have to do what? Only go for a minute or two, and then you're done, right? And so the fitter you are, the longer you can go, but maybe a minute or two after you get to that point. So with these treadmill protocols, you go up and up and up until you reach a what? A maximal level, right? We're trying to get your max so we can calculate your what? VO2 max, right? Because the VO2 max tells us what? How fit you are, right? Because that's the goal. Why are you doing all this stuff to begin with? For fun? You're doing it to try to predict what? How fit the person is. And so every group of athletes ever has been tested VO2 max wise. Whatever you think of has been VO2 max tested. Tour de France people, World Cup soccer players, volleyball players, whatever. And so there's norms for every group, everything you can think of, there's norms. Now in your book, we have norms for what population? Page 80. What population is this? What'd you say? Just normal people? Yeah, these are just people. These are just average, everyday people. Okay? And so these are the norms we would get or use if I'm bringing somebody into the lab and they want to do a fitness test. Just see how fit they are. Okay? Now, if somebody is in the lab, let's say they're a VO2 max, this is for men. Let's say they're a 40-year-old male and their VO2 max is 55.6. They would be at the 95th percentile, which would be really, really good, right? And that's just the average male. That doesn't mean that he's a triathlete or a soccer player or anything else. That's just average people there. Maybe they play on the weekends or something like that, but we don't categorize them as an athlete. Then if we look at a male and their VO2 is 24.2, they're at the 5th percentile. So what does that mean? It needs to work, right? Because that's a very low VO2 max for a person of that age and that sex there. Now the numbers are lower for women, like we talked about, because women have what? A little smaller heart, right? A little less blood volume or whatever. Okay? And so the number's a little bit lower for women than they are for men. So what would our goal be? What would we want to shoot for? Where would we want our people at? If I'm the personal trainer and you're coming in, where would I want you at? You're just a good old person and you come in and want to get fit, what would be the goal? Probably want 75th percentile, right? You'd want them above the 50th percentile for sure, right? Yeah. And so our goal would try to get, and how would we do that? We got to put them on some type of what? Aerobic exercise program. Maybe start out walking and then doing maybe set a goal of a 5K, a walk jog, or something like that, and then build them up. And how much, or they could even do it in the Zumba room or the aerobic room or whatever, or the spinning class would be a good way to get their VO2s up and so forth. Normally we can increase VO2 maybe about 15% in about a 6-week program. Okay, and so and the less fit they are, the easier it is to increase the percentage. If they're really poorly fit, it's easier to move them up. If they're really highly fit, it's harder to get improvement out of them there. So yeah, I think this would be a goal for you to use if your parents or your friends or aunts or uncles or whatever want to start an exercise program, and then you can look at VO2 numbers based upon anything you want to look at, like running a mile at a certain speed or walking at a certain speed is a VO2 of this or that, and then you could adjust your program to try to get them to meet those particular standards based upon their VO2 levels. So that's one reason why VO2 is what? So important, right? And we've got information on this, we've got data on this. Some things in exercise science we don't know a lot about, but we know a lot about VO2. And so as an exercise science student, any place in the world you're studying VO2, okay? And so it's all over the world. Any questions? Let's take a quick 5-minute break, then we'll take your questions, and I'll see if I can answer them.